attention, we're going to start the panel discussion. Now, storytelling to me is really impactful, and the best part about the magazine is I get to meet people and tell their stories all of the time, and I get to share everything they're doing with a bunch of people. But what's even better is when we host events like this, everybody gets to come together. And putting people on stage together to discuss topics that we don't always get to discuss is really influential. And I picked these people today because I've had a chance to meet all of them personally and to get to know their stories and to work with them. And I'm really excited for all of you to meet everybody here. You'll get a chance to hear their story first, and then we'll jump right into the panel. And Jade is going to be our host for the panel today.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you for everybody again for coming. And on our panel here, I won't introduce them, I'll let them do it themselves, but we have Stacy, Venetia, Karen, Stephen, and Peter. So I will pass it to Stacy here and let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Jade. So my name is Stacy Richter. I'm the marketing mind bender, born and raised in Calgary. And one fact that most people don't know about me is that my music career actually peaked at 4 years old, believe it or not. I wrote, produced, and sang my song on the Buckshot Show when I was 4 years old. And after that, it was all downhill, so my career peaked at 4.
I did not have a musical career. My name's Venetia Brielt, and I'm the founder of the Terminator Foundation. And so what that is basically we work with youth and young adults that are impacted by drug and alcohol addiction, mental health issues. And we train them to do triathlons as a part of their strengthening their recovery. So in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, of course we've met, but just as a reminder, Karen Judge, I'm an author of Drive Your Happiness, founder of A Dose of Happiness, and I'm a mind wellness educator.
Hi everybody, my name is Steve Archambault. I'm the founder of Healing Self. It's a hypnotherapy, somatic therapy center. I'm ex-military. Something that people don't know about me is I still have 7 pieces of shrapnel left in my body.
Pete LaFontaine, no shrapnel that I know of. Started my career as a Hudson Bay fur trader in Edmonton, Alberta. Transitioned into technology, owned a couple of technology companies, and now I'm a big part of the rainforest, and I've started another company called Rainforest Energy Corp. Very much focused on community building, and I consider myself to be a mental health pioneer.
As you can see, we got an impressive panel here. So we will start off by asking the question, let's define mental health. So Stacy, we'll start with you this time and pass it on down.
I like to rephrase the word from mental health to mental wealth. And this goes a lot off kind of what Dean had talked about earlier today, where we need to make more income than we do expenses. And I like to look at mental wealth in the same respect that I need to make more deposits than I do withdrawals. And that's kind of the metaphor for mental health for me, is making sure that I have worked on myself first by making more deposits than withdrawals, because at the end of the day, we only have so much willpower, so much energy, and the more drains that we have, that's when we start to see a lot of breakdown. So, I've worked my entire life to build myself, lots of deposits, and trust me, I've made lots of withdrawals too, and sometimes been in a deficit. So that's why these conversations are so important, so that we recognize the opportunities where we can make those deposits into each other's bank account as well as ours.
I think for me and for us and what we do is I would tend to describe mental health as resilience. And in working with our youth and young people, helping them to be resilient no matter what comes their way. And for them, that's overcoming addiction. It's can be overcoming a lot of different mental health issues, and just learning to find that resilience to do that, so that they can just get stronger mentally and handle more as life. As we all know, life throws so much at us.
When I hear the term mental health, it's a term I don't typically use. I believe there's a lot of stigma behind it, and I believe it needs a total makeover. We need a total makeover on mental health. Mental health to me is about being reactive, and I am all about being proactive. And so that's why I call it mind health and mind wellness, because I think that's the hope for change.
Thanks. Mental health for me it's depending on what day it is, honestly, to be able to define it. For me, it's accepting the fact that life is not all straight up. There's downs, and there is peaks of joy, and there's just the normal everyday life, and it's being able to accept those. It's also being able to realize that the stories that we're telling ourselves, or that I was telling myself, aren't really, not necessarily real, but they're also something that I can work with and I can grow with. They don't have to define me. It's being able to realize that to find myself, I go into the darkness, and the darkness isn't scary. For me, mental health it's too big to really truly define, and each one of us and each person in the audience will hopefully have a different definition that suits them, and it brings them to their ideal state of what they want to be. Instead of listening to me define who they should be, it should be them defining who and what and how they want to be, and to me, that is mental health.
Mental health for me is wearing a sweater that looks like Mr. Rogers on the stage. No, it's about a personal journey. It's about being able to pick a path and find a way to cruise on that path and stay healthy. So it should start early in life. It needs to start there, and you need to navigate, like you said. So. Go ahead.
Just yell. No, I agree. It's very personal, and a lot of times we've heard this. I've used this phrase a lot, and we've heard it said. Someone else said it today, saying asking for help is not a sign of weakness, and I truly believe that when someone asks for help, you have to listen, and that is a key. So when we do recognize that someone needs help, because of the stigma that it's so high, why don't people ask for help? Stephen, we'll start with you.
Again, I can speak to my personal experience why I didn't ask for help for 19 years after leaving the military. I suffered through addiction. I now have, actually January will be 19 years free from my addiction. But why I didn't ask for help was because I was ashamed. And I moved up through the corporate ladder, and when I actually crashed, I was one of the best chameleon liars in the world. Not only did I have my addiction to thank for becoming a master liar, I lied to the person the most, which was myself. So to think if you could see what I was going through, I wasn't letting anybody in, and I wasn't going to let anybody see it. It actually had to hit my bottom for that to happen. As for looking for people, everybody's going to have a different journey, and everybody's going to have to ask for that one piece. You can see somebody who's suffering, and you can say, hey, I'm here for you. Whatever that looks like, I'm just here for you. And don't define their journey. Don't sit there and tell them what worked for you. Listen to what they have to say. Miriam Greenspan is a psychologist out of New York, and she has a brilliant line, and without a listener, all healing is lost. And that's where it stays with me.
Probably fear for a lot of people, stigma. If I think of a mother with 2 children that could be suffering from mental health, might not come forward just for the fear of losing her children within the current structures that we have within society today. So I think that fear is learned from our history. We're supposed to be tough, and this is just a coming out for a lot of people.
Wow, this one I could probably talk about for a while, but basically shame, absolutely, and fear. Again, I think the whole process needs to be changed. We label. We're told that we're broken, there's something wrong with us, we're not lovable, and that creates that you don't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. When it comes down to it, we are all looking for the same thing in this world. We want to be loved, and we want to know that we matter. And the whole process in the system does not allow for that. When my mother went into the Rocky View psychiatric ward, it was a terrible process. When somebody goes in for, if you can get them to the hospital in the first place and they go there, the way they're treated, people need a hug. That's what they need. They need a hug. They need to be told, you've come to the right place. This is safe. We've got you. There are answers. They need hope. They don't need to be told, sit here. You're literally put into a room, a rubber room, with a security guard outside, with a small window to make sure you're not harmful to somebody else. That is a terrible, terrible thing to do to somebody. And then they're put into this, and because of my mom's extreme case of being catatonic, of course they looked at the family, and the family being, was there abuse, and there wasn't. We would have to have permission to see my mom through the doctors, and we were treated like we were this bad family when we weren't. We just had no answers. So the process was terrible. Going to these wards, if you're not depressed going into them, you certainly will be when you're there. The atmosphere and the environment does not set somebody up for success. And 20 years later, 20 some plus years later, since my mom's been there, I had a friend this past year who tried to take her life and ended up in that ward, and I went to see her, and they've done nothing to that ward. It's just, the atmosphere is terrible. I mean, if I win the lottery, I want to renovate these places to make them hopeful and happy and bright. It's just the whole process of what we do. And when we go see a doctor, think about this. Mental health is the only illness we treat when we don't, it's the only organ that a doctor does not look at. They treat it with not looking at it. Think about that. And some of this can be many other things. And you're given 5 minutes. And it's based on a system. You're based on a system. Out comes the pad, the medication, the treatment. And if you go through the public system, you're maybe given, a half hour every 3 months. And so if you can't seek out private care, you're going to struggle. So there's, I think, a lot of reasons out there, and it can take a long time, if ever, a lifetime. And so, again, my whole message is prevention so that people don't get there. But there's a lot of reasons people don't reach out.
Wow, I can relate to you on many levels. I know for me personally, I think one of the biggest reasons too is shame. Whether it's it's personally impacting you, or it's your family or whatever, but definitely shame and fear. Same thing, I grew up with a mom who is schizophrenic, and I remember, oh my gosh, 33 years ago, what the system was like, and truthfully, it has not changed very much at all. I just recently, last week, had to take my youngest son into the children's hospital. We didn't know if he'd had a psychotic episode or break or anything, and so even just as early as a week ago, going into the hospital, again, the shame, and it even actually kind of surprised me, because I do this work, I'm in this work, I'm all about advocating and raising awareness, and I still felt that shame come over me. And then having to sit with the doctors after hours and hours and hours and hours of sitting in that room with the security guard, and it's horrible. It is horrible, and it is the shame. It was the shame for me even a week ago. I was scared to tell them about my family history, because I was terrified that they would immediately label my son. And so, we need these conversations. We need these messages passed on. We need to hear these stories, because this really does need to change.
Now, I'm not nearly as credentialed as my fellow panelists here, and most of my experience comes from my family, like a lot of people. I'm not in the industry, I'm not in this space, But part of my story, it comes from my mother's side of the family, where 4 of her 6 brothers and sisters have been institutionalized one way or another. And unfortunately, we've lost 3 of them. And I can remember as a 10-year-old boy with, having a friend over, one of my aunts happened to have a schizophrenic episode while he was there and just said something so completely off the wall. Now, we were used to that with her and how to work with her on that. But the look from my friend, when she says, I spoke with the devil last night and he said you're all a bunch of effers. Now, she'd say effers, of course, but the look that he gave, I didn't think it was just my weird aunt. So that kind of sticks with a person, not just myself, but of course would stick with him and whatever stories people tell themselves. And one of the big issues I think with this particular topic is the spectrum is just so wide and deep, from someone like my aunt and a couple of my other aunts and uncles to somebody who is suffering from depression quietly. Right, we lost Robyn Williams and Anthony Bourdain. Robyn Williams on the front looked like one of the happiest people in the world and entertained everybody worldwide. So I think that spectrum is so wide and deep that people don't necessarily know where they fit in and how to express that. So I think that's where a lot of the trouble for asking for help comes from.
All bang on, whether it be lying or scared or a bad system. I mean, it's all so true, and it's all bang on. And again, the looks that you get from people when you maybe even are in the space and you get this. So why is there such a big stigma towards addiction? Venetia, we'll start with you.
I don't even know if I even know how to answer that, to tell you the truth. For as long as I've been alive, I've been up against the stigma of addiction. Where it comes from, I don't know. I think it's been here a lot longer than I've been here, and I've been here for 47 years. I just always, all I can speak from is my own experience, and again, I think it's just fear. It's fear and shame. It's so ingrained in us. And I think even for those that are not, don't experience maybe addiction for themselves, but they say even their lack of understanding of addiction, of mental health, there's that fear just even of not understanding what it is, or maybe it's a perception that they had from an experience they had earlier, and that's now their perception of it, and which can also cause fear. So I think a lot of times it's just we're not educated, and I don't mean educated institutionally. I mean we don't have an understanding. We don't take the time to understand, and so then shame breeds fear, fear breeds shame, and so on and so forth. But I'm optimistic that I feel like we are making strides. I remember, being 18 years of age and going into AA, like an alcoholics AA meeting at the age of 18, and they almost kicked me out because I was too young. But just even our system then of, you kind of scurry in through the back alley, right? And where we are today, and I know for myself being in long-term recovery now, I'm sitting here talking to you guys about alcoholism and mental health. That didn't exist. That wasn't, you know what I mean? So we are making strides, and I think it's important to remember that as we're, it's still muddy. It's still muddy.
When it comes to addiction, again, I think it needs a makeover as well. I had a cousin who went through addiction, and I supported him through this. And the opposite of addiction is connection. And we have to be very clear that addiction is one in one. It touches all of us. It's not just what we think. We can all have some low degree of addiction, whether it's work, whether it's sports, whether it's everything. We've all got it. It just escalates. But what I find so fascinating is when my cousin went through his addiction, his treatment, he goes through this 12-step program, and at the end he goes, they teach what you talk about. And I said, the sad part is, why did you have to go through that to learn that? This is the proactive side. Let's teach these skills and these tools on the other side so that people don't have to go through this. It's about connection to self. When I said most important relationship is with self, connection to self, belief in self.
So the question is, why does addiction have so much stigma for me? In my own journey, I looked at it and went, I kind of blame the second day. And whether it's Gamblers Anonymous, my choice of addiction, Sex and Love Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Meth Anonymous, you can go on. There's about 127 different anonymous groups out there. And to your point, you're right. We go in, down an alley, we enter in a back door, we go downstairs into the basement of a church, and somebody says, don't tell anyone, you're gonna get fired. Or, don't tell anyone. Well, guess what? I'm a proud recovering addict. And I am grateful that I went through that path. I'm grateful that I had to go into certain darknesses to find my own light. Now, it took me a lot of years to get to that gratefulness. It took me a lot of years to stand in front of somebody and say, and I'm an ex-banker. Bankers turning around and telling people that they're a compulsive gambler. The last guy that did that took CIBC for $12 million. So let's just, it's a big deal. And they get afraid of us. But you also walk down the street. And when you walk down the street and you open your eyes, and the first person comes up and says, can I get $10? And your first thought is, you're just gonna go use it for alcohol. Damn right, the demons inside their head are way better than, way worse than the demons in the bottle. Of course they're gonna use it for that. And they're gonna find ways to get it. We need to rethink addiction. We need to look at outside groups like Portugal, who's turned around and decriminalized every single drug out there. They've taken the money that they've saved on prison and put it towards recovery, and pardon my language, they still have a shit ton of money left over. There's no more prison system for drug addicts because we recreate that when we put them in prison, and then they get on the street and they got a criminal record and they can't get a job. Guess where they go back to? They go back to going into your home to steal for their addiction. Instead of saying, okay, we got you, to your point. We're here for you. You're in a good place. So, and also when you walk down the street and you see somebody on the street, just think about this one fact, and this is one truth. 80% of the men on the street have been sexually assaulted. 100% of the women have been sexually assaulted. Just imagine what you would do to make that pain go away.
What we're learning about the brain, the body, our society, how we work as functions is just on this massive growth curve right now. Science and technology and things like the Branch Out Foundation and the Alberta Family Wellness and the Brain Study certification, it's all on this education curve, and the stuff that we're learning right now just encourages me so much. I could repeat all of these things, absolutely, but I keep thinking of the path and the journey forward. And it's about education, and it's about working together, and it's about what we're doing here today. So
I really don't have much to add to that. I mean, there really is not much more to say. I'd rather really kind of focus on how do we start to smash that stigma, and it's people in this room, on the panel, in the seats, on YouTube, and I think there's been some talk about technology. Man, that is where we start to really spread that, and it's going to take a couple of brave souls to come forward and champion that, but we're already seeing that stuff. So my perception of the stigma is I've never really felt the sting of it because it's been just such a part of my family's history that it just feels normal. So I never felt that pinch, and it's sad to say that it feels normal, but I think that for the most part that it should feel somewhat normal to everybody, and it's more important to say, okay, how do I just feel a little bit better, right? We don't have to make leaps and bounds in one step. It's how do we go one step up on our vibration scale? If we're feeling absolutely destitute, feeling angry is just a little bit better of a feeling. And I think that's where we start to smash that stigma and say, it's okay to feel destitute. What do we do to feel angry? Or if we're a little bit angry, what do we do to feel just a little bit better? And I think that's where we start to smash that stigma.
I like that phrase, smash the stigma. I think that should be a code name for this. I know this question, hits home for me because I lost 2 friends in the last 4 years of suicide, and I never saw it coming. They were part of my team, part of baseball, squash. They were happy, they had families, and even to this day, I don't know what I could have done different, and I think about it every day. So really, what can we do better as a community to improve and provide resources? Start with you, Peter.
Can't say ditto. Damn it. What we can do going forward is, and my friend Jim is going to get up here in a bit, is number one, get a social agreement going. One that says that we should be working together and helping one another, for sure. Understanding what it is so that, we can use science to support what we're talking about, and understand that it's not a big costly thing. It's actually going to save us economically if we can figure this out. This saves many, many dollars. So there's a big economic motivator out there. So I think we can push our governments and our institutions in this direction. And again, the science and then communicating and making sure that we understand how to help one another.
So basically, as I heard the question, it's what can we do to support suicide, or like what does go forward?
Yeah,
correct?
improve resources.
It's a question that I have an interesting time with. My uncle took his life last November at the age of 78, and for me, I read his letter, and it was the most beautiful letter I think I've ever read. It's one of those things that you would sit on a stage with a single light down on the last actor, and they would read this. And I was blessed to be able to be that part of his journey with him, to understand his life and everything else. Moving forward, we have to give people the ability to come forward, to say something. The one thing that disheartened me about my uncle's letter, and this is where it was, and has been said up here about many of the mental health sides of things, is he went to a friend and said, "That's what I'm thinking of doing," as his nephew already knew that this was his plan for his life. And the friend went, "You're crazy, what are you doing?" And just laid into him. And so last November on a Sunday, he went into the old Montreal Forum and jumped from the rafters. At 78 years of age, and he said in his letter, "I realized in that moment I couldn't tell anybody." That moment, that one person said, "I couldn't tell anybody." But this is the stat that saved my life. I thought I was alone. When those thoughts were coming in my head and I was like, man, I'm crazy. I was in my office, one of my staff members were there, she's taking her psych degree, she kind of inspired me. And she goes, "You know what? Suicide's like masturbation. Everybody thinks about it, nobody fucking talks about it." Pardon the language, but that's the truth. And I was like, really? And so it comes across people's lives. Some people it's more than others. Some people's it's only once in their lifetime. But it happens where we want to self-harm because something has gone wrong. And we need to be able to say, hey, I've had this thought, and have somebody turn around and go, it's okay. You're not alone with that thought. And you're not crazy. How can I help? That's how we move forward. In my opinion.
Moving forward, well, I always say anxiety is high when knowledge is low. And I go back to the education's everything. And the bottom line is a lot of people don't know how to have this conversation and don't understand it. And I do corporate trainings, and when I do a training, I start off with a did you know? Everyone gets a ticket in the session, and we play this game, and if you can answer the question right, you get another ticket and there's some prize at the end. So we make it fun. And I put up the mental health stats. And it's amazing. I have not yet once had an organization that has done well on this Did You Know? And usually I have 4 answers to choose from, and it can take them to the 4th answer to answer the question. So stats such as, 500,000 Canadians calling sick to work every day. Mental health like depression, anxiety, and depression being the #1 disability claim, surpassing heart and cancer. That suicide is now the leading cause of death amongst males aged 14 to 48 and on the rise in 50-year-olds, that women are going to suffer most from depression, about how much money is lost in the economy. Like, these stats are just alarming. The fact that Canada, according to the World Health Organization, we rank as the 7th happiest country to live in, which sounds great, which they, it's based on our resources. Yet Canada has one of the highest suicide rates, and Alberta being the highest. What does that tell me? We've got the resources, but maybe not resourceful. Until the community really understands what this is, we're going nowhere. And until there is integration between the community and the healthcare, and we're doing a lot of talking, which is great. I love what Belle's done for the last talk, because I think Belle's really broken down the stigma. But personally, we've got to get past the Me Too stories, and we've got to get to the now what. And that's called action, and the action is prevention. It's education, it's teaching these skills. We should be doing mind health teaching in schools, in the homes, in the workplace on an absolute regular basis. This is top priority, like major. So
I absolutely, like, ditto. I really, I totally believe it's prevention, and education. I love what like Sheldon Kennedy has done with the child advocacy and all the work that they've done with Respect Group and raising awareness about child sexual abuse. And I think we need to model that same thing. All of these issues that we're dealing with are all interwoven. They're all interlinked. Suicide, addiction, depression, anxiety, like we could go on and on and on and on. Child sexual abuse, like they all touch each other. They all meet somewhere. They all started somewhere, and then they all, tap off on the next issue that you're going to have. And so I totally agree. And I know that's even something that Terminator is really trying to voice too, is we need to get this education, this awareness, this prevention tools, all of it into the schools, into our families, at young ages, like 8 years old, 9 years old. We need to be helped where our systems are overloaded. Our teachers are overloaded. They can't handle what is happening in the schools with our kids. Our parents can't handle, teachers can't, you know what I mean? And we just keep passing these kids off. Eventually these kids end up on the street. They end up back in the system. They end up in the hospitals. And it just goes around and around and around and around and around. And so I really do think that it is time for action. Absolutely. And enough of honestly, all the political tape, all the bullshit for how long this stuff takes to actually, for someone to give the word on and to start implementing this stuff. But we need to start implementing this now.
Wow, can we give them a hand? Like, that was... If I can add to what you said, Venetia, is the one, we're talking some major systemic overhauls, but there's one thing among many that every one of you can start doing today, right now, the moment in your seat, every one of us can start doing, is words matter. It's been mentioned a couple times. Jade, you mentioned it, and Steve, and where's Connie? She had mentioned it too. Is Connie still here? I can't see. Words matter. They do. And it, to you, may be a super benign comment. Thanks, Connie. A super benign comment, but to the person who you're saying it to, it may be the one thing that keeps them coming off the edge or pushes them over. I mean, just my own personal experience, I've had several, but one in particular stuck out to me was a business mentor of mine. We built a relationship over 4 or 5 years, and I was in the office and we're having a chat, and I was having a tough time, business and personally, and I just mentioned, I said, yeah, I've been really depressed lately. And now it wasn't over the edge by any stretch, but the one thing he said to me was, he's like, "You're not depressed. I know what depressed people look like, and you're not depressed." And I'm like, "Okay, I know where this is gone." Now, so because we don't necessarily know the entire spectrum on where this stuff goes, and for all he knew, I may have been very well on the edge. Thankfully, I wasn't, and I filled my cup a lot, so I was super strong, and said, "Well, just put that aside." But words matter, and it could be that one comment, like Connie mentioned earlier, that said, "Wow, this has made such a big difference in my life, and it's the impetus to change," or it could be something completely drastic that says, "Yeah, you just confirmed everything I've been feeling for the last 10 years. Let's move on."
Can I just add one more thing to that, because you said it with words. Something else I talk about, and this is something for everybody to leave and think about this, because we keep talking about mental health and people struggling. I'm going to turn it back and ask the question. I talk about this in my book. As much as we need to address mental health, we also contribute to it. And how are we all contributing to it in the community? So what does that mean? Are we judgmental? Do we gossip about others? How do we make people feel, right? To use more empathy. So as much as we have this, it's like smoking in the car with a baby. You wouldn't think of that, but what are we doing to contribute to people's mental health? And what could you be doing to change that? Because we all can do something about that too.
No act of kindness is ever wasted.
There you go.
Well, the first question I asked was, define mental health, and by the time we got to the end of question 1, it was already on to mental wellness, and we know our system's broken, and we've planted Peter inside the government to work from within, so, and Peter gets shit done. So, one of the last one, I'd like just a quick little tip for, if you can give the audience this little tip on what they can do to achieve mental wellness. And now I know that's not something easy or one word or one phrase, but I mean, please try and just share something. Karen, we'll start with you.
I'm just going to do a commercial for myself and say, come visit me at the Happiness Hub. Go on, anybody who's about mental wellness or mind wellness, I call it, and wants to get on this bus, this happy bus, and to make a change, I'd love you to go on, getadoseofhappiness.com, sign up for the newsletter, come down to Bankers Hall. It's called The Collaborative for a reason, because it's about building community and coming together. So my thing would be come visit us and come participate.
One simple thing that I think that works for everybody, and it goes to yours, is meditate. Find your meditation. Don't be a Buddhist monk, because anybody here want to be a Buddhist monk? No? Then don't try to be one. Meditate in your own way, find your path, find some quietness, and go into your space. That's mine.
Join me on a journey that I'm calling democratization of mental health services. That's making mental health services available anywhere to everybody at any time at a price that everybody can afford. We can do that now. We have technology and reach and the ability to bring this forward in a way that has never been done before. Don't wait for our institutions who will say they are doing it and they will brochure it. We need to do it in this innovation ecosystem that we're creating. It needs to happen amongst little pockets, these pioneers that bring things forward.
Where do we join you at, Peter? Do you have a website or?
Yeah, just I'll give you my card afterward and we'll get together and make it happen.
Plug yourself right now. What's the website?
Plug yourself, Pete. Come on.
Plug. It's peter.lafontaine @winhelix.com, and come and join me at the Rainforest, Alberta. That's every Wednesday. You can come out and join that group and then join our club, sign our social agreement, and that's where we start.
Sorry, like one tip? Or,
Yeah.
I think for me, the biggest thing that helped me, that kind of started my journey of healing was coming out with my story. And so if you haven't had the opportunity to share your heart, like your, anything that's hurting or bothering you, to find someone that you can talk to, find someone that you can get it out with. That was, I know for me, that was the first thing I had to do, was to open up.
And one thing I would say, fill your cup first, and then fill every other's with your overflow. I mean, there's a reason when we're on a plane and they go through the safety instructions, they tell you when that mask comes down, put yours on first. Because if you don't, you try to help somebody else and you don't get there, then they have two problems. So fill your cup first, and then you can fill others with your overflow. Whatever that means, if it's meditation or coming out with your story or coming into events like this and continuing to share this on social and broadcast these messages, fill your cup first, because you're in a much better position to help somebody else when you're coming from a position of strength.
Those are all great advice. Thank you very much. And I would just add to that if someone does come and ask for help, listen, because it's not about you. So with that, we'd like to open it up to the audience for any questions. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, again, thank you very much to... Oh, we got one here, Greg.
Could I make a suggestion? We're all family in the room here. Is there any light bulbs that came on as you guys listened throughout the day? Rather than having a formal question, was there some ideas that bounced, a learning and insight, a big aha moment?
I think we should save that for the end.
Okay,
we
sure.
still have 3 more speakers.
Okay.
Everything that's going on is unbelievable. Like what people are talking about, the stories that are being shared with everybody, and everybody can leave this room and go and share it with everybody else. The panel is amazing. Like the experience you guys have alone just to share with the room is remarkable and inspiring. So thank you so much.
Yes, Stacy, Venetia, Karen, Stephen, Peter, thank you very much. And we will take a 10-minute break and we'll be back.